Judges, our next participant is Ottawa University to tackle the question of the United States political leaders are proposing new policy restrictions on international imports in the form of tariffs and quotas. With steel, are these proposals a good idea?
All right, so first I wanted to talk about trade in general and the effect that tariffs and quotas have on trade. Tariffs and quotas attempt to limit trade through policies that promote home competition. And home competition is going to be promoted politically, but economically the consumer is going to be hurt. So this policy goes against three of the economic freedoms that are conducive to flourishing. One of them is competition and increased regulation, and it goes against free trade. So why exactly do tariffs hurt the economy? People of each nation benefit through trade. Some countries make products better than others, and allowing us to exploit that benefit, we reduce our costs tenfold. Tariffs attempt to limit trade and help home competition, but it can artificially raise the price of consumer goods. This hurts the consumers at home. And for example, we can see that the lumber tariff that has been in place for the past 5 to 8 years, we've seen that the price of lumber has increased dramatically. And with steel, if there was a tariff on steel, the prices would increase just absolutely insane in many areas of the country because steel is a commodity and it is in everything.
So if we see that tariffs and quotas hurt consumers, we must ask the question, why would politicians put them into place? We can answer this by looking back in time to the Smoot-Hawley trade bill that took place in the 1930s. There was a lot of pressure on Congress and the President Herbert Hoover at the time to help out American companies because the foreign competitors could just make these products so much cheaper. And so what they did is they passed a bill which increased tariffs by over 50% on over 3,200 different products that were imported into the US. And so then we look at what did that do to the US economy? Well, it tanked it. Not only did it hurt consumers by making domestic products more expensive and foreign products much more expensive, it also hurt American producers who exported goods because those other countries didn't like that we increased our tariffs by so much, and they responded by putting up tariffs on our goods. And this then led to our international output cut by over 50% from what it was before the Smoot-Hawley bill passed. So now let's look into Peter Leeson's work on capitalism and economic freedom. We can see that there's a direct correlation, a positive correlation to economic freedom and capitalism. And the more of that you have, it leads to more flourishing. Examples of this is economic freedom leads to higher GDP. It leads to higher income. It leads to more democracy. It leads to more education. And it leads to
Greater life expectancy.
Greater life expectancy. Thank you, Lawson. And it leads to greater life expectancy. And these are all attributes of human flourishing.
Now, from the reading by Doug Bendo, it is a mistake to treat freedom, which is the essence of capitalism and virtue, as mutually antagonistic. In fact, liberty, the right to exercise choice, free from coercive state regulation. So with that being said, nobody can really like you can't really thrive under somebody's thumb. Nobody likes that. I don't like that anybody here that doesn't even do any of that. So with that being said, you can't just put these regulations on people because that just opens up a barrier. I can't finish a race if there's a barrier in front of me. I can't do so. And virtue cannot exist without the freedom to make those choices at all. Coerced acts of conformity or with some moral and the government has also proved that it is, the government has proved that it is not a good teacher of virtue.
Alright, so at the end of our presentation speech here, I'm gonna connect the dots between what this policy would do towards human flourishing. Our packet here was what is the connection between freedom and flourishing, and as my fellow colleagues have done a pretty decent job of explaining, when you put things like tariffs and quotas up, you diminish the freedom of the market. When that happens, that also diminishes the freedom of the natural human in general, therefore their odds of getting to human flourishing lowers. Now, there are many attributes that go into human flourishing, and I'm going to explain why putting a tariff on steel would actually hurt things like cars, buildings, weapons, pipes. So just some real life examples here. Shelter, homes, definitely need that to flourish. Same as clean water, which we use steel pipes for here in America. Another thing is how Bryce brought up, Peter Leeson's, when you use capitalism, life expectancy goes up, education, more income, and democracy also showed to go up as well. Those are some key important things for human flourishing that without you can't have.
That's it.
Thank you guys.
Okay. We have time for judges to ask you some questions now. Sure.
I think you guys did a great job making a case for the claim that it benefits society overall to not have these restrictive trade policies. But if I'm a steel producer that's a domestic steel producer, do you have an argument that tariffs will actually harm me as an individual too? Or is it just that the harm that's done to me by losing my job to overseas competition will be outweighed by the benefits to everybody else? Does that question make sense?
Yes. Let me take this one. What you're saying, yes, it is going to hurt that person individually, I believe, more than it would help them. But I know a common political thing to be brought up is it's going to save jobs here in America, but actually that's not the case. It's just going to redistribute jobs to certain markets. So if you don't have a steel company because it's overseas, it's cheaper to produce, what's going to happen is either you're going to have to change and produce something that you can produce more cheaply here. So it's not actually going to necessarily hurt you. While those transitioning years might be tough and might be difficult, what it's actually going to end up doing is having you produce something that the economy wants you to produce.
Not to mention that your demand is going to be a lot higher in that market because there's quotas and tariffs on these supplies coming in. And because there's not enough supplies to go around, your price is just going to go up, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you to even outsource your product, export it to external sources and sell it there.
Yes.
So I've heard a lot about how it benefits consumers and we get cheaper stuff, but don't we have a moral obligation to protect the American workforce, to protect, say, the steel provider who might be out of a job? How do you address sort of that moral issue that doesn't your government owe them something to keep them protected?
I would say yes, and I think we do that through our social welfare programs such as unemployment benefits. It gives them that opportunity to transition into a new field where their skills and talents are needed and more productive. And I think that feels the moral obligation that we're helping them transition into things that helps everybody overall. So it's not only helping consumers with lower prices, but it's also helping them to be in a job that won't be, or that is good for the economy.
Now, there's one thing I will say is, yes, right, when one door closes, another door does open. I will say that, because like you said, you might be cutting out that person, but how you mentioned earlier, it's going to pretty much, you're giving somebody else pretty much a second chance in the will to be able to use that skill that they were, I guess you could say, either gifted or learned. and then that can help the economy.
If we're talking a moral obligation, I think government's moral obligation is to pursue human flourishing among its people. And I think the more we go about exercising our freedoms and promoting freedom in a country, to a certain extent, promotes that human flourishing in people. Now, whenever you limit the amount of an import coming in, you may be actually hurting the consumer as the prices are going to increase. So yes, you may have a moral obligation to your people, but in the process, you're also hurting the people.
We might have time for one more question, or we can call it there. All right, thank you, Ottawa University.